Michael Popok, Legal AF After Dark. One podcast, two anchors. This past week, Karen Friedman Agnifilo, Michael Popok. We're talking about all things New York civil fraud, the trial against Donald Trump and all the Trumpers, and what happened in week 7. I mean, what didn't happen? Donald Trump Jr. testifies. A bunch of experts for Donald Trump that are nothing of the sort and quickly dispatched by the trial judge. And then we haven't even talked about the crying. There's no crying in lawsuits. There was crying in this particular case by an insider for Donald Trump for 30 years, former employee, former controller, Jeff McConney. Take a listen to Karen and me. So let's start with bringing everybody up to speed about the New York Attorney General civil fraud case that's now just finished week 7, moving into week 8. I'll give a couple of the highlights and then I'll let you dive into some of the testimony so far. We did in the first 5.5 weeks, it was the New York Attorney General's case, meaning they had approved their case in chief using their evidence, their witnesses, including hostile witnesses they pulled from the other side, from the Trump organization. So we've heard a lot of these witnesses before. The New York Attorney General put on Don Jr., Eric, Ivanka, Trump himself, McConney, the controller who reported to the CFO, Weisselberg. All these people testified, the outside auditors who quit the job, quit the client because of fraud at Mazars. We heard all these people in the case in chief for the Attorney General. Last week or so, it was time for Donald Trump to put on his defense. For those that are following this not as closely as you and I are, other people in our audience, you might think the defense is the law clerk is biased against Donald Trump. That seems to be all that they talk about. Must be that the law clerk has done something so egregious that they have a right to an appeal and reverse whatever decision that Judge Engoron makes in the case. And we all know that is balderdash. It's just the only talking point that they have because they're losing in the courtroom. But now they got to put on evidence. I mean, enough of this sideshow of attacking the judge and his staff, which has got them gagged twice, and we'll talk about that next. Let's talk about what is the evidence they have. We have on one side 25 witnesses for the state and 3,500 pieces of evidence or more. What do you got? Well, we lead off with Don Jr. Okay, well, Don Jr. already disqualified himself. You hear New York getting ready for the holidays out in front of my office. You have Don Jr., who already disqualified himself when he testified the first time around for the state. He said, I don't know anything about the personal financial statements, which are at the core of the case. Were they fraudulent? Were they cooked or not? And did Donald Trump use them to his benefit to obtain loans he shouldn't have gotten, insurance he shouldn't have gotten, permits he shouldn't have gotten, approvals he shouldn't have gotten, and the like? Yes or no? That's it. That's the binary issue that's involved in the case. You wouldn't know it from how the Trump people are putting on, their lawyers are putting on their case, but that is the issue. Donald Trump, Don Jr. said, I don't know a thing about the statements of financial condition. And I'm not an accountant. And I really don't know how those things work. I asked somebody else. So you're like, well, how did they then use him as the first witness? The big roadmap witness to turn the ship around in favor of Trump. And all he did was give a bus tour of all the gleaming properties and talk about things outside the scope of the case. So he's irrelevant, and the judge already noted that. Then they put on a series of experts who none of which had the expertise or the ability to testify about the key issue left in the case, which is, did Donald Trump intend to commit various counts of fraud or not? They don't know what was in the hearts and minds of Donald Trump. Worse, the Trump people purposely didn't give the experts any of the underlying facts, data, or exhibits for them to review that go to the issues in the case. So they just got up there like, I'm here to tell you about how insurance works, Judge. And just like, what do you have? What do you say about these issues? Right? And I'll give you one example, Karen, you might have caught. I did a hot take on it. They put up an insurance expert. Everybody leans forward. Oh, this will be good. What is he going to say? And he said that not in his experience do underwriters who make the ultimate decision about whether to give insurance or not for an insurance company like Zurich, they don't rely on what's in the media. So that Donald Trump tried to get himself in the Forbes 400 list or in USA Today, top, they don't look at that. And then in his own report, They said, but on page 32 of your report, you said it's very commonplace for companies like Zurich to rely on Forbes and USA Today. The exact opposite of what he just testified to, which the judge then, slapped his forehead and said, I don't even know what to say about that testimony. So these experts are going terribly. And then it all came, and I'll turn it over to you on McConney. McConney, who has always been one of my favorite witnesses for many, many reasons, having nothing to do with the strength of his testimony. One, he's gigantic. I don't know if you've seen photos of him standing next to regular sized people, but he's gigantic. I mean, he must have played football in college. He has a disturbing resemblance to Captain Kangaroo when you and I were kids. So that's two. Three, he already testified against the Trump organization in tax evasion because they gave the year-old office, the Manhattan DA, gave him immunity, and he had to testify, and that led to a 17-count felony conviction for the Trump organization for tax evasion last year. So I love his name. I think anybody that has Khan in your name is great. So Jeff McConney gets on the stand again the second time. And the thing that we didn't know, that we learned during testimony, is that McConney used to notate and put in the margins, we call it marginalia, all sorts of notes about the financial statements to get questions answered by Donald Trump. Hey, boss, we haven't closed that deal yet. Should we list it on our assets? No. If you haven't bought it, you don't list it on your assets. Donald Trump was like, yes, do that. All these blue handwritten notes that Donald Trump claimed in a deposition, he had no idea where those notes came from. They came from Jeff McConney. And they didn't get those documents, the New York Attorney General, from the Trump organization. They got them from the accountant, which also shows they destroyed evidence. So McConney is cross-examined about his notations that say this financial statement, fraudulent, has to be approved by Donald Trump, or when Donald Trump left and to go to the White House, by Eric Trump, which completely counters their earlier testimony. And then the waterworks happened. Why don't you take it from there?
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't realize he was this gigantic person, very tall, because all the press reporting was talking about how apparently he was crying throughout his testimony, So now I have this visual of this oversized man crying on the stand. But anyway, Mr. McConney, who was the comptroller, testified, that, look, he worked there for 35 years. He was one of their top executives. And, this was like working for a family, and it was super cool. It wasn't just like any other accounting job. I loved working here because I got to do things like representing a casino, a reality TV show. And, numbers alone didn't fully represent what Trump's assets were. And, he liked the wheeling and dealing with the various celebrity types, it seemed, through his testimony. But according to the reporting, on his direct testimony, he talked about how he did the same thing that the kids were doing, right? That Don Jr. and Eric and also Donald Trump was doing, which is pointing to Mazars, their long-term accounting firm, and saying, look, they did the numbers, they're the accountants, we relied on them, and that's all. So they're basically passing the buck to their accountants who no longer work for them, who fired them, and who issued a statement saying years ago you cannot rely on any of the numbers that we put out. So that was his direct testimony. But on cross-examination, he also talked about why he left, by the way. He said the stress of all these cases were too much for him, and he wanted to relax and stop being accused of misrepresenting assets for the company that I love working for so much. I mean, that was kind of what he said, gag me is how I wanted to respond. But anyway, what happened next was on cross-examination is close to a Perry Mason moment that we had in this trial, in my opinion, so far, right? The got you that you see on TV. Isn't it true that, this and that, that doesn't happen in real life, especially in a white collar paper case. But here, what happened was there was a government exhibit that, as you said, had his notes scribbled on it. And it was Trump's statement of financial condition from, I think it was 2014. And it says it couldn't be clearer, in blue handwriting, DJT, Donald J. Trump, to get final review. And he admitted that that was his handwriting. He admitted that those were his notes. And it absolutely goes against what Trump said, which is, right, he denied any involvement. And he basically then went on to say that Trump would get the final review of all his statements of financial condition, and that there were notes on there that showed edits, right? That he would put things on there and then make suggestions, and it would come back and some of the suggestions were not made or were made. It was very clear that that was reviewed above, and he testified that Eric approved them while Trump was in the White House, but that Donald Trump absolutely was the one who approved these and was involved in them. But, look, he contradicted himself, right? He contradicted his own testimony where he said that he's the one who reviewed the drafts with Weisselberg, who would then approve it. But this document that he was able to be cross-examined with, maybe they didn't know they had this document, right? But because otherwise he would have been prepped and would not have said that. So I think he was caught with his pants down, and it also shows, in addition to the fact that Donald J. Trump to have the final review, it really shows that the statements of financial condition were something that went back and forth between Trump or his son and the CFO McConney, Weisselberg, and Mazars, because there were drafts and there were things that were crossed out or put back and that sort of thing. So I think it really definitively proves that that Trump was involved. I think this was fairly powerful, in my opinion, as a witness in this case. And I think the judge is going to rely on this when he finds Trump liable, right? And he finds Trump and others, liable, that they can't just say, look, this is Mazars, especially in the ones where there was the counts that are left in addition to the damages. Because don't forget, right, there was, I think, 7 or 8 counts that he is being charged with here civilly. And the judge already found the first count that he committed persistent fraud throughout his financial dealings in overvaluing his properties. But there's still counts, I think 2 through 6 or 2 through 7 left. And those require added elements of it has to be intentional, and it had to be material, meaning the banks or the insurance companies that either loaned them money or gave them insurance policies relied on these false statements, thought they were true, and it was material to their decision making in order to determine whether they were going to do that or not. And so it's still to be determined whether or not those elements are met. But I do think this goes towards intent, and I think it's fairly powerful evidence. And look, I don't know why he was crying, maybe because he didn't want to have to throw his old boss and, this family group under the bus, but they lied. And you can't, lying under oath would be its own thing. It could be perjury, and that would be a crime. And so I guess that was a bridge too far for Mr. McConney. And when confronted with the evidence and with the facts and his own handwriting, he had to tell the truth. And look, that's where trials are so powerful, right? And that's because you get to swearing to tell the truth under oath, and having the fact that you could be prosecuted for perjury. That's a big deal, and it tends to be one of the great equalizers. I think it takes a lot for someone to lie under oath, in my opinion.
Yeah, his testimony is going to be the missing link, I think, and it's going to be featured prominently in Judge Engoron's written opinion, which we should get at the end of December, if not in early January, in which he needs to cite a piece of evidence, the judge, that is the connective tissue between Trump, Eric Trump, Don Jr., the fraud that is at the heart of the case. It'll be Jeff McConney's testimony, because it completely refutes things that when Donald Trump was shown a statement of financial condition, he says, I barely looked at it. Really they want to dump on Mazars, rely on outside people. Eric Trump, same thing. Eric Trump had to walk it back because they showed him documents in which they said McConney wrote him an email saying, hey, take a look at the statement of financial condition. He said, well, I didn't realize that would be the personal statement of financial condition for my dad. I just pour concrete or whatever the crap Eric said. And now they set him up, the New York Attorney General McConney, because they walked him in to explain the process for the statement of financial condition, the personal financial statements for Donald Trump. And he said, oh, well, I would prepare with Alan, then I show him to Alan Weisselberg, then we'd give him the Mazers, the outside people. That's what we really relied on. And then they would print the final. And then they had to show him in his own handwritten notes all over the personal financial statement while they were in draft, year after year after year. He was Mr. Spreadsheet, Mr. Note Taker. They had to say to him, wasn't there one more step in your process that you've left out? What about the step in the middle before it went to Mazers, where Donald Trump was asked by you to approve and review the statement of financial condition that is showing $200 or $300 million of inflated assets? What about that one? And then Eric Trump, when he went to the White House, what about that? Yeah. And I agree with you that it was a buildup over years of McConney having to testify against a quote unquote place that he loved. But the crying came out because Suarez, the lawyer doing the direct exam for the Trump organization, I forget who he works for. I don't know if he works for Alina Habba's firm or he works for Cliff Floyd's firm, but he said to him, do you work at the Trump organization any longer? Or why don't you work there any longer? I love that place and I can't take it. All the investigations, having to defend the accounting records and the testimonies and the trials. And then he started spouting out all of the investigations that are against Donald Trump, as if that was helpful, that inventory, including one we're not sure we even knew about. He said, there's a Southern District of New York federal subpoena that I had to respond to. We all went, wait, huh? Are you talking about the Michael Cohen one? Or are you talking about something else like the feds are now looking at Donald Trump criminally for business practice, maybe insurance or maybe IRS fraud, tax fraud? What are you talking about there, Mr. McConney? I guess we'll have to find out next week. So that's where he collapsed. But you're right. But let me give some confidence back to our audience. Yeah, we're here trying to prove 6 more counts of fraud. It's 7 in total. One was already proven by the New York Attorney General and the judge on summary judgment without trial, found for that persistent fraud happened. The judge, based on just the count that he already found persistent fraud under, the standalone persistent fraud count under 63-12, could take away Donald Trump's businesses, his money, his buildings, and the like. I can't think of a remedy that the New York Attorney General is asking for that requires these other 6 counts in order to accomplish it. Even the judge, just to remind everybody, I think I mentioned it once before the trial even started, turned to the lawyers for the New York Attorney General and said, do we really need to do the other 6 counts? Why don't you dismiss those? Pardon me, now that I've ruled in your favor, and we'll get down to remedy. And they said, the New York Attorney General said, no, we want to do all 6 so you can hear all of the evidence. They were all geeked up because they had, 4,000 pages, 4,000 exhibits and 25 witnesses, and they wanted to put it all on.
But I think they did it also to preserve the record. I mean, look, they know this is going to be appealed and it's going to be highly, highly analyzed. And so I think they want a record. They want to put their case on so that count 1 is proven, even if that for some reason they say that Judge Engoron, erred in ruling in their favor. Hopefully, at least in the trial, hopefully he'll rule again. Now they've even proved it, again or still or whatever, just to kind of say it's harmless because it's clearly there in the record. I don't blame them from doing that, actually.
No, I'm not. I wasn't raising it to blame them. I was raising it to say to our audience, even if somehow with this ridiculous presentation of their defense that we've outlined for the last 20 minutes here, somehow made Engoron find that 1 or 2 or all 6 of the remaining counts weren't proven because of that intent and materiality standpoint, he is going to whack Donald Trump and the organization for hundreds of millions of dollars and do major, maybe existential damage to their businesses. Well, that's an example of what we do every week on Legal AF. If you like that and you know all about us, welcome back. If you have no idea what I'm talking about by Legal AF, it is the curated podcast at the intersection of law and politics that we do every week on Wednesdays and Saturdays, 8 p.m. Eastern time. And then the leaders of Legal AF, we do hot takes. Yeah. Hot takes about every hour at the intersection of law, politics, and justice. One place, MeidasTouch Network and their YouTube channel, help them and that platform get the 2 million free, I said free, subscribers. The bigger they are, the bigger they get, and the more your voice is heard. Until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, this is Michael Popok reporting.
Hey, Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram at MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.